Hello, hello, everybody. How are we all doing? Hope everyone is doing well. It's the beginning of the month, so we know what time it is. It is portfolio time. Hope you're all ready. We're going to be looking at 4 people today. We're going to see if I can get it because it's been a while since since I was able to get to 4 people in total. So we'll see. We'll see how far we can get. Yeah, hopefully everyone is doing well. I've had pretty busy weekend. Team challenges are in full swing, so did a lot of feedbacking together with the beautiful help of our challenge support and then also our judges as well. They've been helping out with all the feedback. That's been good. I think a lot of teams are in like a really good spot. We unfortunately had another team that dropped out of the challenge, so that is a little bit unfortunate, but those things happen. Like the more that we do these challenges and the bigger that they get over time, the more that I'm just like in awe that like a lot of people nail like the technical challenges, right? Like just getting to do the work once like everyone is like on the same page, is all that kind of stuff. It's just being on the same page and the communication that honestly usually is a downfall of like most teams. It's always pretty interesting. But it's also like an interesting way of learning that those communication skills by kind of been thrown into the fire a little bit, you know. So yeah, it's been interesting to see that, especially as we scale up, as we have more teams. I think we're gonna definitely see more of that because the complexity just increases for us as an organization. But yeah, overall it's been going good. Teams have been posting their progress in the Discord, so if you are a member, go and check that out because it's actually worth looking at. If you scroll all the way down, there should be a channel called Challenge Progress, and you can check it all out there. Yeah. How many more weeks do they have? I think 3 more weeks. So 2 more check-ins, and then the last week is gonna be where we do like the final live stream, which is gonna entail us looking at the work together with the judges, and then doing our voting, and also like revealing the winner as well, or winners actually. Something that we still need to decide on. But yeah, it's going good. Otherwise, what else has been happening? A lot of organization outside of it too. Talking to people. I'm currently talking to one person who is potentially going to organize some more just like chill events for the Discord. So just a little bit of community management, just a little bit of just like having fun, like making sure that people get introduced to the challenge, get to know each other a little bit more. Not the challenge, but the Discord, right? Because right now everything is so work focused, but we don't really have like anything that kind of breaks that apart from just people popping into like random voice chats, right? But it would be nice to have like a dedicated like monthly thing that people can jump in and get to know each other as well. So that's on the books. Other than that, yeah, organization stuff, but I'm not going to bore you with the boring details of that. We're here for some portfolio reviews. Like I said, we have 4 people today. We have Damian Cortes, Callum Roberts, Beau Walker, and Mo Farhan. I think the only person where we had a little bit of context was Mo, so we'll dive into that as we get to it. But enough talking. Let's get into it. So we're gonna switch on over. Oh jeez. Hold up, it's cutting up a little bit of the scene. How is this gonna work out? Oh, this actually works. Oh, it auto hides though. No. Damn it, I didn't foresee that. Whatever, we'll make it work. Maybe I could do something in the meantime. Yeah, there we go. Let's do that instead. Cool. So, let's get cracking. First, Person of the day is Damian. Damian from Winnipeg, Canada. Lovely to see you here. We have a variation of work here. So let's first start with the person here. So we got 3D environment / props / foliage. I'm already gonna say pick one of the three, right? Like environment and props, I can kind of see the overlap there. Once you start lumping in foliage, like I can guarantee you now that there's not going to be enough for us to be convinced that you can do foliage as like a specialization, right? In that sense, it's probably always better to do 3D environment artist. And then if you have a lot of foliage on your portfolio, that can be a thing that like people hire you for, but you don't necessarily need to bring that forward unless that is your only specialization, right? It's just the small stuff, but I feel like that usually makes like a lot of difference. So let's not pick yellow, please. It's horrendous. So specialize, right? Specialize yourself and then let the work do the talking in comparison to that specialization too. And then your description says 3D artist. It would actually be nice. I know that the chat is a little bit in the way. It just says 3D artist. I would honestly flesh that description out a little bit more so that we have like a little bit of your background, a little bit just more context, right? Like where you're from, like how, where did you study? Like where have you studied? What do you like to do? Like give us some flavor, right? Like give us some flavor text that we can identify you with rather than just 3D artist, right? Give us some locations. Have you moved in your life? All that kind of stuff is going to be interesting. And keep it short, right? Keep it short, concise, and just snappy. Cool. So if we land on the main page, this is all the work that we can see. This kind of goes into number one again, right? To specialize. I would honestly make it so that you land on a specific page or hide stuff that is no longer relevant from your main page, because now you're just throwing everything on the table and then you're expecting us to kind of pick what you're good at or what is interesting to us, right? You want to self-direct that and show me in this case like what you want to do, right? Because now you're just throwing everything on the table. So we have material, one environment. I think this door is from that environment as well. I'm honestly not even going to count that. I don't think the complexity... I know that I'm being like very, very to the point today. But I'm trying to be like a little bit more concise. But I think that the scope and the scale of the environment does not warrant that you split out the door as like a separate prop, because it just doesn't warrant it, right? You can easily just have like the door built into this artwork, right? And kind of have that as like an additional thing in this whole lineup. So that would be an easy thing, just to kind of cut this sucker and then like add that to the main portfolio page. Because I've said this multiple times before, not in this live stream, but in other live streams before, where it's not about the quantity of the items in your portfolio, it's about the quality of them, right? So as soon as I can feel that you're like dragging out your portfolio, I feel like you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and that doesn't look good, in my opinion, right? Because now I know that you're kind of dragging out your portfolio just to like, I don't know, prop it up a little bit. But I think that's going to do more damage than it does good in the end. So this is all like very, very quick, just instant reaction stuff, right? I think this is like an offline render. I think this too. I think the reason why that's immediately identifiable is because we kind of have like two of the same sort of setups what I mean with setup is that you kind of have like the same sort of thematics going on in two separate pieces, right? So these two kind of have some foliage going on, but there's a noticeable difference between the one that you did last, which is more game related, and the one that you did before that, which doesn't have like any of the restrictions that games have, right? So what I would expect to see is that you take all the eye for detail and all the attention to detail that you put into that first piece, and then also translate that to the second piece as well. But that is missing here, right? And then, especially because we can contrast the two, it becomes really clear that in comparison, it feels like something is missing, right? So yeah, that was like very immediate reactionary stuff. So let's have a look at these artworks more individually. We're kind of going to skip over these two, the one that we're going to begin with, because these are offline rendering. So it doesn't really count for game-related rendering. Maybe the only thing that we could look at is like the topology and all that kind of stuff. But even the topology is like purely made for like VFX related stuff, right? This is not what you would want to see for like a game scene necessarily. It does look good though. I do have to say, I like the post-processing. I like the way that it feels. The thing, and this is probably going to be a thematic that we'll see recurring quite often, is the amount of stuff that you add to your artworks, right? So for example, we have this screenshot here, and then we have this screenshot, which is slightly more bloomed out, I would say. And then we have this screenshot. And yeah, I'm not sure what like maybe this is like a progression thing, but I'm not feeling that, right? It feels just like you're just throwing like a bunch of images at me, and they feel very chaotic and very disorganized, right? So I don't really know what you're showing off with these images. Usually a stereotypical template is like you have the one main image and then make it super clear that the rest of them are breakdown images or additional variations or something like that, either by having a banner on the image itself or by adding it into description. I always prefer to have it visually on the image as well, because if then someone saves it out of ArtStation, like it's embedded in the image rather than on the website, right? A good way to present like these work in progress images is just do like a GIF, right? I know that this is like 4 years ago, so it's been a while. Just something to keep in mind with your new artwork as well. So yeah, that was a quick one. Let's dive into this one here as well. So this is also offline rendering, like a presentation here. It's small stuff for me, right? Like texturing look dev artist, but now you're now you're a 3D environment props and foliage artist. Again, this is from 2 years ago, so we're getting a little bit closer to what is current. But this is also kind of showcasing that there is something going on where you don't really know, or you haven't had a direct goal for what you wanted to do, right? Because you kind of went from like, oh, VFX is really interesting, texturing, foliage, look dev, and then now we're in like a 3D environment art realm. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that specifically, but you got to keep in mind that that might show that there is some experimentation going on and that there's also some indecisiveness going on as well, potentially, right? I wouldn't necessarily see it as that because it is from 2 years ago. So there is like a decent amount of time, but that is something to be aware of, that other people might perceive it that way. Presentation itself is quite decent. It is... I like this shot. This shot where you have like an environment built around it. Like, that looks good. I like this one. I like that one a lot compared to the more like neutral ones. You could just have used like the one that you had before that, you know? Yeah, cool. So this is more like a texture challenge. Looks okay. And now we're getting into the game stuff, right? So we kind of glossed over those two because in the grand scheme of things, I know that you've kind of put them onto like an offline render page, but if this is still the page that you're gonna send to like a studio, then that is a reaction that you also might get from a studio as well, where they could be like, oh, is this still relevant? Because first of all, it's old and it's also not related to games. So think about that perception, right? And we got a foliage vignette here, made during the CGMA class. Stuff looks nice. All the sculpting looks pretty interesting as well. In terms of portfolio presentation, I would try to capture them at like a high resolution. Because right now we're kind of getting like a lot of fuzziness and a lot of blurriness as well. I know this might also be like hardware dependent, right? So you might not be able to. But that is something that I would definitely give a try. Just to make sure that you get in like the highest quality on your portfolio. And also play around with like additional like settings, right? Like for example, the camera that you did where you're using a little bit more depth of field, using a little bit of bloom, that post-processing kind of knowledge that you have from your VFX experiences, right? Or experimentations. Use that knowledge in here as well and try to translate between the two. I will say the ground foliage looks really good. I'm not really convinced by the trees themselves. I like the branches, even though like some of them are like way too thick for what they are. Or I'm kind of expecting it to be like more gnarly, so that you get like more like gnarly, knotted kind of feel, and then those branches kind of like sprawl out from that. Right now, you just have like a solid, just like solid trunk, boonk, going straight up, and then there's like just branches coming out of it. It's missing that like character or like that uniqueness that you have, right? This feels a little bit too standard foliage model. And this is only in relevancy to you yourself calling yourself a foliage artist, right? Like if you're not gunning for a foliage position, I mean, I would still try to improve the tree for sure, but then you get like a little bit more slack because you're not calling yourself a foliage artist. You know what I'm saying? So it's the perception, or like the perception that you are setting people up for, that is going to make them more critical or less critical towards like certain elements of your portfolio. So the presentation itself, I think you can definitely like cut out like a lot of these images where you have one main shot, one detail shot. These two, especially the last one, is just a variation of shot number one, right? It's just slightly different angle. Be very, very intense about this stuff, right? Like have some intensity around like picking the shots that you want to have for your portfolio. Make everyone count. Like if there's one that is slightly duplicated from the other one, like cut one of them out. Like pick the best one. Like really be precise with how you want to present your work. Same here, right? We're getting two shots from the same thing, and I prefer the top one, and I think that this one is like kind of irrelevant. Right? Because the purpose of these shots is that you want to show us like, hey, this is all the stuff that I made for the scene. I get a better overview when you show me something like this compared to this guy, right? Because some of the assets are like out of bounds. So that's a way that I always think about things. Like think about the purpose of those images on your portfolio and how you're presenting them for that specific purpose. right? So the same thing here in terms of presentation, combine the two, right? I like what you're doing. You have like the material sphere, you kind of have like all the textures laid out. Combine the two, like take a little bit of extra time to combine them into like one cohesive presentation, right? And always think about the thing that I bring up a lot is context, right? If you have a bark material which looks good, have like the tree next to it, right? Rather than on a material sphere. Try to take it to like the next level rather than just doing the sort of like easy stuff where it's on a sphere, right? Like try to like to actively think about like how you're going to be presenting your work. Same for this stuff. It is the minimum bar, right? It looks good. But it also looks like very typical, right? Everyone is doing this stuff. Try to take it to the next level. Make it more exciting, right? There's a little thing here in the description that says, and I quote, "There are still many things to improve in this project, but I will move on to the next one that I have in mind." I would never say that on your portfolio because, again, you're messing up with the perception that other people might have, right? You're saying that, oh, this isn't finished. And if I'm looking at your portfolio, then I'm like, okay, but if it's not finished, then why is it on your portfolio? Right? You're asking people to ask that question from your work, right? And if you're not happy with it, because that's also what that question is kind of like, kind of pushing you towards, or what you're kind of leading to, then why is it on your portfolio? Right? It's like your portfolio should be the collection of the best things that you can do, right? And obviously, as artists, we're always in flux. We're always going to be growing and we're going to be improving. So the realization that you can do better now, that's totally valid, right? But at the time of posting, like, don't make it sound like, oh, you just wanted to get it off your chest, right? It sends a bad feeling out there. Cool. So the door, I've already said my opinions on the door, right? It's literally just taking the CGMA course here, stripping out the door because you felt that you needed to present the hero asset, and that the door was like the most interesting thing of the scene. But I don't think it is, right? Like this door doesn't really convince me of like what you wanted to show, which is like the high to low poly workflow, right? And that you can take care of like a hero prop. Like it's not really doing that for me. So I feel that like splitting it up feels like a thing where you're trying to pad out your portfolio rather than adding anything meaningful to it, right? Again, it comes back to the idea that quality over quantity, right? What I would rather see is that you don't have the door as like a separate thing, and that you then spend a bunch more time making like a really cool barrel or whatever, right? Like something with like a little bit more character, and that has extra detail or like extra time spent on the texturing and the modeling and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. Let's see. So this is again one of those cases where you are showing this, right? And we're just like slowly zooming in. And then straight after it, you're showing the same thing again, but then static. If you want to show something exciting, don't do the static shot, right? Like keep us engaged in it. Same thing here. You can easily cut out like half of the stuff that you have on display here and make it more pleasant and more streamlined in the way that you present this stuff, right? Pick the best stuff that you have on your portfolio. Like pick the best views, pick the best compositions, pick like the most interesting angles, focus on some nice details. Yeah. Let me have a quick look. It is actually quite interesting that you decided not to put like the night scene higher up, because this is really interesting to look at. It has more contrast. It kind of goes more towards feeling like an actual scene rather than a vignette, right? I think this is like really cool. I would honestly push this like way up higher. And if we then let's do a quick count, right? So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 images in total. Well, images and GIFs, right? Cut that down to 5 for this project, and then do breakdowns, right? Add that breakdown that you have for the door. Add that in here, right? Like a single image, like the door itself, the texture maps, all the details, and the high and the low poly comparison, right? Like add the wireframe to it too. You can have one image that has all the information that you're basically trying to showcase in this entire breakdown, right? You can really condense that down to like a single image. And then potentially you can add like the turntable to it as well. Potentially. Me Animates, hi, I'm a general CG generalist and I'm looking to learn more about environment art. Any guidelines on where I should start? What things I should focus on? If you have like a CG background already, and you know how to model and wrap and texture and all that kind of stuff, I would look into storytelling and making like a diorama, which is like a small scene with just like a handful of assets, but really focus on the storytelling of that scene. That's where I would start in your case. That kind of depends on how much experience you have, right? But that's where I would start. Because to me, storytelling is the beginning of everything. Like it drives the props that I need to make, the scope of the scene, like all that stuff can be linked back to the story that I'm trying to tell. Cool. So yeah, we were talking about like condensing the prop door back into this image over here. Let's have a look at the actual breakdown. Oh yeah, first block out. Yeah, so again, a lot of this stuff, a lot of these images, right? Like the quantity of the images is not needed. I would honestly say these 3 items can be condensed into a singular piece and just make it like really thick with knowledge, right? Like add all the knowledge and kind of compress it and make it really well presented. Because, for example, this GIF is really cool, right? I was kind of missing that from the main post. And if you want to separate it out, you can have all your main images and then make an image that is literally a banner that is called like breakdown, right? So it has like it says breakdown on it, and from that point on you can just add like all the stuff that you want to break down, right? But yeah, this GIF is cool. This is super handy, like to know like all the individual props that you've made. This is super cool to look at. Again, you can kind of condense it down to 2 images rather than the 4 that we have currently. And then for all this kind of stuff, I am never a fan of just like a screenshot from a program. If you want to present it in this way, do something with it, right? Like take it to the next level rather than just taking it from, hey, I took a screenshot, posted in my portfolio. It feels lazy, right? Like this is super easy to do and everyone else is doing it. Maybe, again, like what I just suggested to Mi Animates is, Mi Animates, we animates, maybe let's pronounce it like that. Is that the storytelling is really important, right? So try to maybe link it to like the story of the scene. And just do a little bit more with it, where you can just have like, I don't know, higher depth of field, building in the back, but we can't see it because it's blurred out. Something like that. And again, it's like most of the same stuff, right? First block out here, I would not post that. I'm gonna be honest, like I don't really care, especially because this is way more interesting to look at than what you're trying to show off with that initial block out, right? It also looks like nothing really has changed comparative to the block out, right? Like it's not like the building became more crooked and like really expanded or something like that. It kind of stayed like very samey, apart from the add-ons and the attachments that you added to it. So yeah. And then the original concept art, like you have that linked here. Oh no, that's your work. I would honestly link this piece in here as like a direct link in the description. That links back to the original creator. That's what I would do instead of linking back to your piece. So that does mean that you have in your portfolio now 2 less pieces, but if you treat them well, they're going to be way higher quality and going to have like a bigger impact. Because I can guarantee you there have been people looking at your portfolio and then being like, oh, this is pretty neat. Yeah, there's a lot of like the same stuff in here, but it's looking pretty cool. And they go into this thing and it's like, oh, it's the same project. Okay, yeah, okay, we get it. And then it's like, oh, this is the same project again. Right? And it's just, it kind of feels like padding immediately. And that's not what you want to leave people with once they look at your portfolio, right? But yeah. Cool. Okay, so this material is interestingly called Street Material, a Work in Progress. I would not post work in progress on your ArtStation. If you want to do that, do it on your blog post, right? Don't post like work in progress images on your ArtStation. Again, it comes down to the idea that you want to put your best foot forward, right? Let's say this is not your best foot forward. Would you want to get like a recruiter looking at your work and then being like, oh, whatever, like they don't like it or whatever, right? Because you haven't put in like the final time to polish it. Like whenever, you got to see it like this, like your portfolio is like your invitation card that you send out to like other people to then hopefully get an invite back to their company, right? And you want to make that like the most polished, like kind of finished thing that you can. If you want to have work in progress stuff, add it on your blog instead. And again, a good exercise for what is coming, pick a couple of shots and then do a breakdown, right? The breakdown is going to be relatively simple for this material, but just have an image with like a texture resolution, potentially like a GIF on how you approach it or something like that, right? Because the material, you can't really do that much with it, but it is cool to have on your portfolio. And I like the presentation. I mean, we talked about this in Work in Progress Wednesday, that I like where this goes. I like that you added like real life props. I like that you have like the shadows going on, but it's about still the underlying idea where I want you to show me the best of your work and that you can pick your own best pieces, right? Because that is like a really important part about being an artist yourself, is that you know what looks better than other things, and having that filter for yourself where you can decide like what you want rather than posting almost 2 of the similar shots, right? Cool. That was a lot. I know we went through that really quickly, but let's do a little bit of a recap, right? Let me grab a drink here and then we'll do a little recap. Hello, Beau Walker. Good to see you here. Hello, Joe. Good to see you here too, buddy. Happy to have you back. Is there a good video on modular development for environments that you could suggest? As Muyat is saying, There is an awesome workshop that we have on our channel from John Arolano that has been really well received, and a lot of people seem to like it. So I would definitely go check that one out. Um, on modular development for games, I could probably say that on ArtStation, the one that they have for free from ArtStation Learning. Oh, it may, I don't know if it's still free, but they have a good series, like a good tutorial series on how to approach game environments in general. So it's not focused on like the modular environments, but that one is really good as well. It is a fantastic workshop. Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate that. Hey, Rotwan. Good evening. Hello, Muyad. I believe it's still free. Yeah, I don't know where I'm getting this from, like in my head, but I assumed that they were gonna change it in the new year or something like that. They were gonna make everything paid again. Or am I just wrong about that? All that stuff is changing so quick. My old brain can't keep up. Yeah, I don't think they changed anything since Fab, but I think there was something that it was going to be free for a certain amount of time. Me animates. Just curious, but is it that as an environment artist you're supposed to make all the props and the textures too, or should you focus on more blocking and set dressing to get the desired results? No, so there's a difference between the two, right? So in a professional manner, like the people blocking out the scenes are level designers. So that's kind of like a different discipline just by itself. As an environment artist, you will oftentimes in a professional setting focus a lot of your time on set dressing and then potentially also props and textures. But by far, in my experience, especially working on like AAA open world games, you'll be doing a lot of set dressing because there's a whole bunch of the world to fill, right? If you're working on different developments, or let's say you're working for an outsourced studio, you might be more involved with actually making modular kits, individual props, focusing more on the textures and all that kind of stuff too. I would say as an environment artist building your portfolio then, you have to kind of focus on everything, which is kind of annoying, but it kind of comes with the territory, right? There are ways that you can kind of scope that down for yourself though. What I recommend for people in the beginning is that you start with singular props, right? So that you get like all the technical knowledge that you need. And then you build your way up to bigger environments by starting with like a couple of props that tell a consistent story. And then you expand outwards until you can do like bigger and bigger scenes. Because making the transition from a singular prop to a full environment is a completely different skill set. And it's going to require completely different techniques. So that is something to keep in mind. It is free to claim until the end of 2024. Is that the tutorial stuff you're talking about, Adam? I assume so. I thought it was something like that, right? Hello, Gav. How's it going? Good to see you here. It's been a while. But yeah, let's do a little recap for Damian. So, recap. Megascans. Saw Fab and was half listening. How dare you, Adam? No, no, not the XP tutorials. The XP tutorials are actually free. Oh, actually, that's a good shout out. Luan, oh, how do I pronounce his surname? I feel so bad because he's my lead currently. Luan Ventoriti? Oh my god, I probably butchered that. But he actually has a tutorial on EXP, which is also free on modular environments too. So give that a watch too. Hello, Flinsky. Hello. That's a good shout out. So a recap here. What did we recap? So first of all, massively quality over quantity. right? So this is gonna go, this is gonna go. We're gonna combine that all into here. It's gonna look way cleaner. It's gonna be less confusing. It's gonna look nice. So quality over quantity, we're gonna do that. Also decide like these two offline rendering stuff, like hide them from your main page, right? If you have that option, of course. I don't know how it works with like the subscriptions now. Second is presentations, right? So you can definitely improve the quality of your presentations. Just in terms of the visuals, right? I'm not even talking about the breakdowns yet. That's probably going to be point 3. But point 2, I would say you need to kind of figure out how you did your presentations. Well, on your new material, it looks awesome, right? And then you have like your older stuff, which is the more VFX related stuff. That looked good as well. But I don't know what happened in between because it seems like we kind of lost something along the way. So we need to get back to like making those presentations that add context to the scene, that add storytelling, all that kind of stuff. So story plus context, always very important. And then number 3 is breakdowns. I want to see more expansive breakdowns for everything, right? And it always comes down to the same thing. Wireframes, poly counts, textures, like all that kind of stuff. I want to see that like broken down, and so that we can kind of see what you've done and how you approached your assets, right? A couple of bonus points, because we talked about a lot, is find out what you want to do first. I think that's going to be very important. Like find your specialization, because we have foliage, we have a material, we have some environment art, we have some like a prop. Like it's kind of all over the place. But what I think the industry wants to see a lot, especially if we're focusing on AAA, is that they want to see a T-shaped person, right? Very, I don't know, biz dev term. But what that basically means is that you have your entire skill set, right? So you have your entire skill set. You have one skill that is awesome, and then you have like a bunch of skills that are like mediocre to decent, right? So like these skills can include, for example, your foliage, right? Or your assets or whatever. You get to decide what you want to shine, let shine, right? For me, it was always environmental storytelling and set dressing and making scenes. That's what I love to do, right? So I probably care less about the individual assets and the individual textures, because I'm always focused on the scene, right? The scene itself. You just have to decide that for yourself, like what you want to focus on, and make that the star of your portfolio, right? And just double down on that. If you are still experimenting, which I can get, you kind of have to do experimentations that are targeted towards figuring that out like in the quickest possible way. Are these environment art portfolio reviews a weekly thing on the channel, or is it just today for some special reason? No, I do this on a monthly basis, so it's not weekly. I do give weekly feedback. So every week on Wednesday, which is going to be tomorrow, I give feedback to all the people from our Discord. That's also going to be live on this YouTube channel. If you want to sign up for portfolio reviews, I think you can sign up in the description down below. Let me quickly double check that. Let's have a look if I'm correct in that. It is not. Okay. This music always brings me back. So this is the form that you can use to sign yourself up for a portfolio review. I do have to say, all the people that are a community member, so people that sign up and pay to get access, they will skip the queue. So that's a thing to keep. Queue. Right. Damian, I hope that was helpful. You're on a good trajectory. I know that we talked a lot about the feedback, right? You're on a good trajectory. Keep it up. Keep focusing on the quality. What I'm seeing from your latest material and the way that you're driving yourself towards like higher standards when it comes to attention to detail, that is awesome, right? Keep on focusing on that and try to then have that same sort of attention to detail on whatever you're gonna pick next, right? Cool. Thanks, Damian. Thank you. No worries. All right. We're going to dive straight into the next one, which I might switch around because I know that Beau Walker is in the chat. So we are going to switch that around a little bit. Let me see if there was any other context here. Portfolio reviews. Where is that channel? I'm looking for some constructive criticism that could help with my development skills when creating environments. My portfolio can be found here. Awesome. Happy to meet you, Beau. Beau from Brisbane, Australia. 3 years of experience at the Studio Kaboom from the University of Canberra. And then a bachelor degree in game development and interactive design at the University of Canberra. Okay, cool. So I'm assuming that 3 years of experience is basically just your course. That stuff is a little bit confusing, the way that you kind of set it up in your profile. If it is, I wouldn't necessarily call it professional experience because that is just going through uni, right? If you started your own company or you joined a company that was somehow attached to the school, then that's different, right? You can keep it as professional, but just make it somehow clear if those two are separated or not, right? Because it can kind of look somewhat deceitful when you say like, oh, I have 3 years of experience at like studio, even though it's like the university itself, right? Just something to keep in mind. You don't want to run the risk of like being, I don't know, being misunderstood or deceitful. Not that that is like your intent, right? But like, honestly, most of this stuff comes down to very specific wording of things and like how people perceive those words too. So it's better to be very, very, very deliberate and very careful with those words, especially on your professional portfolio. Okay, cool. I have it adjusted with my resume. Yeah, but I would also reflect the same changes then on your main page, right? For just in the case that people don't like look at your resume and already for whatever reason are like, oh, I don't get what this is saying, so I'm not gonna approach this further, right? I don't know why they wouldn't, but like, you don't want to be running the risk, right? Cool. So, first impressions, I kind of want to start there. We kind of have a couple of different tabs. We have games, level design, and props. We just quickly flick through this. Also, these are like games that are made, I'm assuming, within the studio or something like that. And then you have environments here as well. Cool. And then you got weapons. Let me just get I'm not going to spoil anything. No, I'm not going to click on anything yet. Something to think about is the presentation of what you're doing, right? Like I can see a transition going from like your older work to like the newer work, which is kind of taking more presentation in mind, right? So for example, this over here kind of looks nice because the picture itself is like very inviting or like intriguing to a lot of people, right? Same thing can be said about like these ones as well. But the other ones that have just like the gray background, they're very dull looking, right? In their presentation and like how inviting they are to someone looking at that work, right? So we kind of have to like add some additional flair to the whole thing to kind of make it more inviting for people to click on it. Let's have a quick look then. When was this? So posted last year. And then when was this one posted? Posted 7 months. Okay, so these are like relatively close together then. I would assume. Or unless like everything kind of got posted in like the same sort of time span, right? And it was just like an accumulation of all the work. That could happen too, of course. It's kind of... When was that made? 8 months. Kind of just quickly looking at the date. You get sort of like an impression. Okay, so everything is kind of around that like 7 months to like a year kind of area, which is interesting. So uploaded all at once. Okay, so can you give me some additional context then? Like, is this from is the older work, for example, from year 1? Or is it all from like the last year? Or like, just if you want to keep it really simple, give me like a range of the years that you kind of worked on this. It's probably easier to do. And then in the meantime, we'll have a look at things. We're gonna start out. I might skip the games for now and look at the assets by themselves. UVs for the rifle. This is a UDIM, right? Unless it's not. But like I will honestly say, like, having this sort of like UV setup for a gun, that is scary to me as a games artist, because there's no way that you need what are we looking at here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different like texture sets to do like the UVs of a gun, right? I mean, if it was like a really highly detailed gun, I could get it. I could potentially understand it. But comparatively to what we're getting as like visual output, it's just not worth it, right? I don't know if this comes from because what we see a lot, or like what I see a lot, is that that students get a that students get like an understanding, or like a basic understanding of how to make stuff for films, and then they approach games in the same sort of way, which is not correct, right? So for example, for an asset like this, you would try to optimize all of it into like a singular UV, and then combine it into like one texture set, and that's it. Sadly, I switched between 3ds Max and Blender, so I was not able to readjust. So if that is the reason why, I would say that it's not necessarily good to then have it on your portfolio. Like, it's totally fine to have like experimental projects that you never post, right? Because it comes down to the idea again, like we discussed with the person before you, that like it's quality over quantity, right? And if you are unsure about like how you did something, or if you know that something is just like completely wrong, and this was just like, I don't know, a fun little project to kind of have on your, not to have on your portfolio, but like to switch programs, then that makes sense, but then don't post it. Yeah, interesting. So let's have a look at some of the other stuff. Oh, what I will say about this one is that the stuff that you are sharing is really helpful, right? Because you have a wireframe, you have all the UVs, you have your references here. The only thing that I'm kind of missing is like the texture sets, right? But keep building on that, right? Like showcasing that you can make game art is integral to having a game art portfolio. So the stuff that you're posting on here is already a great start. So keep that up. Let me see. So the spear and the space station is fairly old, but the rest is somewhat new. Okay. Space station. Oh, that's that one. Okay, okay. That one looks interesting. Hello, I am late. Hello, late. Welcome. Such a stupid joke. Oh my god. Animates, is it a thing in the industry to have a look at the dates of when an art station was published? Yeah, because you want to get some context. You want to get some context of where that person was in their timeline of becoming an artist, right? So if I can tell that you've done like some really cool work, like in the last, let's say, month, but then you have some like really bad looking art that is from like 5 years, then I can be like, oh yeah, but that's like just old work, right? So that timeline just kind of gives some context to how good or not good something might look. That's the main thing. When it comes to your portfolio, you kind of want to cover all the details, right? I mean, it's hard to kind of like retroactively like upload and all that kind of stuff. So you can't really change the dates, but at a certain point, like it does make sense to look at your work in chronological order and then just cut out like the last things that kind of fell off, right? Cool. Saber sword model, glowing version of Excalibur, low poly version. 2D reference. Okay, I would honestly categorize this into like the experimental folder again, right? Where like same as the previous project. Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I do realize that this is a quote, right? Like, so Beau's saying, I do realize my renders are not the best and I'm working on that. That's fine, right? That's why I love doing these. I do realize that everyone is kind of on their own like little trajectory of becoming an artist themselves, right? But I think in these projects, I mean, the two that I looked at, right? What is more important is that you get like a solid understanding of the technical approaches on how to make game assets, which is always for singular assets, always using a high poly that you then bake down onto a low poly. So that sort of fundamental understanding is not what I'm seeing here yet, right? Because this is, or it might be, depends on what you did with this, right? Have a quick look. There is a bevel on there. Yeah, there is a bevel on there. So I'm assuming that this is not like baked down. Gonna see if some of the other ones are. A quick look. Okay, cool. It's looking nice. So all in one UV. That's looking nice. 3D model and texture myself using 3ds Max and Substance Painter. So I'm assuming that you didn't do like any high poly and all that kind of stuff for this yet. This is just purely low poly, and then you just paint on top of it, right? So that will be something to look at for your next project if you want to get into making game art assets. Is having the low poly that you can then project down onto like having a high poly that you then project down onto a low poly, right? Very common, especially when it comes to individual assets. That's going to be very common. When you're doing assets that are like more scene related, there's other stuff like trim sheets, tileable textures, a whole bunch of stuff that you can kind of like do smarter ways with. But for singular assets, it's usually that kind of workflow. So let's see, the staff was old, I think. Oh no, the spear was old. And the space station was also pretty old as well. Do we post a link here? No, there is a link down here where you can post your work if you wanted to. But we are currently going through a backlog and it will take some time. So we're not going to get to everyone's work in this single session. Just letting people know. So I would say that like all the comments that I've given about your current portfolio can be applied to like all the individual assets, right? Focus more on game art relevant pipelines. And then once I would say that's like the most important thing, right? Do that first out of everything. And then once you're kind of comfortable with that pipeline, then you can then take that to the next level by focusing on the presentation and the texturing and all that kind of stuff. Because making assets for games is it's not easy, right? Like it definitely is not. So it's gonna take some time before you have like all the individual techniques onto a point where you kind of feel good about what you're doing, right? So give yourself time, be patient with that, and try to level them up like on an individual basis. Because I can guarantee you, and this is sort of like a warning, the first time that you're gonna be actually baking things down from a high to low poly, you're gonna be annoyed. And you're gonna question yourself why you're even doing this. That's totally fine. Like, kind of just try to stick with it, right? Because making a singular asset for the first time is going to be annoying, but I bet you that it's going to go better next time. Cool. So we're kind of lumping all of this stuff in the same category, right? So I would say all this stuff kind of goes into the same category because same kind of approach, so they're all quite relevant to each other. Now, let's dive into the environment art stuff then. Environment was developed using Unreal with the help of Quixel Megascans, creating models using 3ds Max and texturing in Substance Painter. Also, let's focus on like the lighthouse for a second, right? Because that's the one thing that you modeled yourself, right? Because the rest of it looks from Megascans from what I can see here. This is where we're getting into that environment art territory, right? Where if you want to make a lighthouse sort of look detailed, you're gonna have to combine like a couple of things together. If we do like a very quick breakdown for, well, we're going to generalize a bit, right? So for any big surface, you want to use a tiling texture, right? Which is what you're doing. So onto the right track there. However, you do want to break up that texture with some more intricate techniques like vertex paint, for example, which allows you to paint variations of a texture onto a singular model. So you could then have a broken brick model, a clean brick model, and then kind of paint in between them using vertex paint that is in Unreal Engine, right? So it allows you to just like use a paintbrush and go over the whole thing. For smaller surfaces, so for example, like these railings, you could also use a tileable, but what is also pretty common is that you could use a trim sheet. And trim sheets are basically just imagine textures, but they have like a bunch of trims on them, and you can use like every trim as like its unique strip. So if you just have like I don't know, like an edge of a wall or something like that, you can kind of map it along that trim. And we're going to go into the technical bits a little bit here, so feel free to ask questions if I'm going too quickly. But basically, a trim sheet is really good at creating repetitive things on like a strip, right? So imagine that all these sections, they will kind of like repeat endlessly from like top to bottom, right? So you can kind of lay on like any strip you want for as long as it wants to go for, which is really useful. And then what you can do is for like the more unique pieces. So for example, for this guy, potentially, because you can make it out of like one or two as well. Like you can use a tileable or you can use a trim sheet. But then potentially for the more unique sections, you can use like a unique texture. If you need that detail, right? In your case, you don't need to, but I'm giving you like a generalized overview on how to approach like any sort of surface in an environment, right? So yeah, that is where like the difference is, right? But you're still going to be using the lessons from all the baking down from the high to low poly. You're still going to use a variation of that on the other techniques that you'll be using, right? Because a trim sheet, it's basically doing the same thing, but you're just baking all the information down onto like a flat plane so that you can then use that to texture all your models, right? This is a whole bunch of information. So take it like one step at a time and kind of build your way up there. That's why I keep re-emphasizing, start with like a singular prop, go with the high to low poly workflow and figure that out first, because that's going to be the base foundation to then build up on like later on. Cool. I think we talked enough about this one. Let's have a look at some of the other ones. The environment of an old decrepit wooden house in the middle of a forgotten landscape. Old rusting telescope towers behind. It's cool. I kind of like the layout of it. It's not that clear yet that like the tower itself is not attached to the building, because it feels like there's not enough separation between the two. But I kind of like the layout of it. It kind of takes you from like the right to the left, and it kind of has some intricacies going on. Let's see. Yeah, this is where it gets interesting, right? Because you, from like a certain point, I'm trying to explain this without getting too technical, right? From a certain point, what is going to happen if you make really big assets is that those assets, if you were to like make a single UV and like a single texture, there's never going to be enough resolution on the asset to kind of look detailed up close, right? So at that point, that's why we kind of need to do all that stuff that I just told you about, where you like break it up with like multiple tileable materials, with vertex paint and trim sheets and all that kind of stuff. The reason why we need to do that is because of this, right? A giant asset like this one in particular, like you can never have enough resolution in your texture to make it look good up close, unless you're gonna work with tileable textures, right? Because right now, looking at it from this distance and this size, it looks okay, right? But like a person is gonna be this big. So imagine that we're standing next to it. The texture that we're looking at here is gonna be really blurry, right? The way that we can kind of combat that is not using a singular texture, but we use a tiling texture that repeats over and over. And then to break up that repetition, we use vertex paint again, right? But that means instead of, let's say this one texture has a resolution of 2K, right? So 1048 by 1048 pixels. For this entire thing, we can then switch that up to using a tileable texture that can use like a 2K map for every 2 meters or something like that. That means that the detail that we add onto the model is going to have like a way more resolution, because we have like more texture space to dedicate to each individual section, right? And then it just becomes a way of how do you want to split up that information, right? That's why I brought up the previous exercise of tileable textures first, then trim sheets, and all that kind of stuff, right? We could do the same exercise here and have like the main shapes be tileable textures. And then if you need something to look really unique for whatever reason, you can then dedicate like unique information to that, right? So that could be an option here. The same can be said about the house as well. This guy could work. Let's actually see how big it is. It is quite big, but this gets to a point where like the size and the scale of the asset is enough to make with a singular texture. So this one's doable. This one can work. Same for this one. That works fine. Same for the barrel. That all looks good. It's just for the bigger assets, we cannot rely on a unique texture anymore. We need to kind of break it up. I'm gonna share a link from our website. Actually, drink. This is risky because it gets pretty technical. But if you want to know more about like the topic that we're talking about now, like the amount of resolution that you need to have for the amount of space that you have on your assets, this could be an interesting document to read through. Cool. Let's jump on over to the latest piece then. Like I said in the previous one, like this is in progress. I would never post like keep the work in progress stuff for your blog, or either not on your ArtStation, right? Keep it for like the finished work. So yeah, we're not going to spend too much time talking about this. I like the composition, right? The composition is quite nice. Composition is quite nice. You have like a clear direction, but there's nothing wrong with this, right? Like working from a concept. There is something to look at in terms of like the colors, right? Because yours is more monochromatic, as in it only uses like one type of color, which is blue. Where what we're seeing here, it is blue, but it also has green influences coming into play as well, which gives the scene a more complex feeling than just using a singular color. So that could be interesting to look into. Yeah. Looking forward to see how that is going to come together. Let's have a look at some of the other stuff here. Speed tree, that's cool. Challenging yourself with a bunch of new approaches. This is a great example of, let me see. Oh, it's interesting. You just have everything overlaid on top of each other, I'm assuming. Which, I mean, that is a legitimate technique. It's just that, yeah, it gets a bit confusing that they're all just overlaid. In a sense where what you would normally do is, for baking purposes, if you have multiple things that use the same UV space, right? Let me see if I can give an example, because this is going to be horrendous otherwise. Is there an example here? Okay, so you have a plank, and a common thing to do in games is that we use symmetry in our UVs, right, to save on texture space. So we actually have the top section of this plank is going to look the same as the bottom texture, but because we're not seeing it at the same time, it doesn't really matter, right? So that's like a common technique on this example. So the reason why you can't have them overlaid is because if you then bake it, right, and this is what you're going to get into later on, that if you then bake that information, it's going to try to bake that information twice. Which I know sounds like freaking, I don't know, out of this world right now. But yeah. Whatever, we don't have to go into that. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out what is happening here. Because you have two separate sections, right? Two separate top sections. But I'm not sure how you're getting like all this information. Can you tell me, was this baked, was this made in Substance Painter? All this like moss information that you have on the top of it? Assuming so. It was. Okay. So that is another technique where the vertex painting could help, right? So that you don't do it, you don't bake that information down onto a texture map, but you do it in the engine instead. Another thing that is a very, very common practice is using modularity too. So modularity just means that we try to break up like repetition in our scene in like reusable chunks. So in this case, what you could do, oh my god, go a little bit smaller here. What you could do is you could just texture one of these arches, right? And then just duplicate the other ones. So you're using the same mesh with the same textures, right? And the only thing that's going to be different is the vertex data on top of it, like the vertex paint data, right? So this basically allows you to have, so this is the base, and then all the rest of it are what we call instances. This is actually turning more into a lesson, actually, now that I'm realizing it. But what we can then do is we have like a base texture, like a stone texture on it, and then add that moss into it in Unreal Engine. And then we can kind of paint wherever we want while not adjusting the base texture that we have, right? So we're not adding that information into the texture sets, which is really cool because now we have total freedom of like how much moss or how clean it needs to look. And we have complete freedom over that. So yeah, definitely stuff to look into. There's a lot of, and this stuff is all like fundamental to us as like environment artists, right? If you don't know those techniques, you will not get a job, like straight up. I think those are like the crucial, like foundational pillars to get a job, especially in AAA, especially in like the bigger studios. There is more flexibility when it comes to indie games because they usually have like a kind of different like approach to things. But yeah, for the bigger studios specifically, you need to crank up that like fundamental knowledge for sure. I did not think about that part. No, that's all right. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff to think about constantly, right? Which is kind of intimidating, but also exciting for game art. So, let's do a little bit of recap. So a recap here would be for, first of all, the first thing we talked about is, again, quality over quantity, right? So really important, only show on your portfolio what is the best that you can show, right? Or like in a certain range. Second thing is definitely familiarize yourself with game art pipelines. That is, honestly, it is number one in terms of priority. This is huge, right? This is super important. This is currently blocking you from like getting a job in games, right? So that's the first thing to focus on. Like really going back to like the fundamental knowledge, starting with high to low poly, really getting to grips with that, and then expanding onto using tilables, right? Like blending tilables together with vertex paint, then taking it to the next level with trim sheets potentially, and then kind of building your knowledge up, right? And then number 3. What could be number 3? Honestly, I think that number 2 is going to be like such a big task, right? Because there's a lot to learn that it's potentially not even worth talking about number 3. But I would think about the presentation of your scenes, right? We're going into like a really, really good direction with the new stuff that's coming up. Using a concept is a quick way to get like all the fundamentals like kind of sorted out so that you can just focus on the execution of it. So keep doing that because that's going to help you tremendously. And then once you kind of got like really comfortable with the skills that you have, then maybe explore doing your own things, telling your own stories and all that kind of stuff, right? Build on top of it. Yeah, and start infusing it with your own stories as well. But yeah, I would say that's a little recap. I know that there is still a lot to learn. Don't be intimidated by that. Keep it up and try to split up your artwork into very skill dedicated and skill focused projects. So for example, the high to low poly thing, right? Like watch a tutorial first, follow the tutorial, make sure that you understand everything, and then try to do your own thing based on top of that. Don't pick anything complex, just get like the base concepts like figured out, because it is very technical, it is very boring, but once you're done with that part, it will open up like the doors to like all the rest that you need to know. So yeah, I would say best of luck, Beau. Thank you for your crucial input. This really helped me understanding what I need to work on. Yeah, very, very well done. I mean, it's my pleasure. That's what I wanted to say in like my weirdest way. Yeah, but I appreciate you sharing your work as well, right? I know that this oftentimes is not an easy thing to hear, and I try to kind of like be very conscious about that too, right? But you got this. Keep on working on it. And keep on asking questions and improving, right? You're gonna get there. Coolio! Let's have a sit down, and then we're gonna go on to Mo. Wait, is Callum here as well today? Calling out Callum! But I think Mo is here today, so I think we might do Mo first. All right. Let's put on some chill music as well. Hello, Miyad. Welcome, welcome. Do. It is. I made the link. Probably one of the least complex ones because it has like the same icon, right? Oh no, you don't have an icon. Well, you do have an icon. You don't have your headphones on, do you? Hard to tell. Critical input from people in the industry like yourself is how I can learn what I need to practice. Yeah, exactly. We're all here to help. Cool, Mo. Let's have a look. First of all, 3D environment artist. Cool. I've been passionate about games since I was a kid. 2 years ago, I transitioned to become an environment artist, starting my journey at Think Tank Training Center. Now I hold a diploma in games environment art, fueled by my imagination and inspired by nature, films, and stories. Constantly push my limits of growth. Yeah. This is actually really great, even if I'm not getting, even if I'm not the one getting advice. It's still so good to hear what is and isn't really important for someone who's in the industry. That is awesome to hear. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying this, and I hope this helps you too. But yeah, maybe this is like a question for people in the chat that are just lurking. What is everyone doing right now? Do we have like people that are trying to get into the industry? Or do we have some professionals as well? We'd love to see the split between people. While we do that, let's have a look at Mo's work. So first impressions, 3D environment artist, kind of, yeah, a really decently written description, which is good. Short, to the point. Nice. Let's have a look at like the overall image, right? Like, the banner is looking really interesting. I like the banner. Kind of has like a very serene kind of type, right? The Haunted Sanctuary is the old project. There's 5 months between them. Okay. Bodhi is trying to get in. I mean, yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm surprised by people like not getting in, knowing their work. But I mean, you'll get there for sure. Bo is trying to break in. Yeah, you got this, Bo. Francisco looking for my first job in the industry. Kaio is also finishing one more project to apply. To start to apply. Okay, that's cool. Just lurking as per usual thing. Work do be work. Ken is looking to get back into the industry. Burned out a decade ago. They're definitely looking to get back in. Oh, do you mind if I ask where you were working back then, Ken? I mean, you don't have to say. I'm just always nosy, I guess. I was saying, just modeling a new model. Still too early for me to try and break into the industry. Yeah, we're all on the same path, right? Like, some people are just like earlier in the journey, but it's good to see you here. Alex is finishing a senior year at school, trying to get into the games industry. That's awesome. Best of luck, Alex, whenever you're gonna try to get in. And Justin is trying to get in as well. We have a bunch of people like trying to get in. It's an interesting time to get in. I'll tell you that much. But I will say, like, consistency and like looking at this as like a marathon rather than a sprint is gonna help you a lot. So keep putting in like a daily amount of work. It doesn't have to be a lot. Think about like your it sounds so cliche, but like your survival and like your mental health and all that stuff first, right? You gotta be in this for the long haul. So if you have to do another job in the meantime to get like bread on the table, do that, right? Like, don't feel bad about like taking up like other jobs too. And it also heavily depends on location, your personal work and all that kind of stuff too. So I'm trying to break into the industry. If you read the Discord, I want to know what my weakness points are. What am I missing? Yeah, we can dive into that. And an artisan is saying, I'm trying to switch from films to video games right now. Been a lighting artist for the past 5 years, and I'm wanting to pivot to environment. That's an interesting pivot. It is definitely a different skill set. Where like lighting is a thing that you have to do as like an environment artist. But you don't have to do an environment to be a lighting artist, right? So best of luck in that journey, artisan. Was that an outsourcing company in Malaysia? Lemon Sky. Okay, interesting. It's like starting from the ground up. Thank you. No worries. Best of luck. Okay, so Mo, let's have a look. First impressions. Oh god, this is gonna sound so pedantic. This is a me issue, right? Not a you issue necessarily, but I'm very picky about the fonts that I see. For example, I'll give you a little bit backstory. I never played a Final Fantasy game just purely because of the fonts, right? So take that into account. But when I see something like this, right, like a very basic font, I don't know. It's me talking. I think you can improve that, or just don't use a font and just have like a really cool thumbnail, right? Because I think once you start adding those things to it, like if it's not done in good taste, like it just distracts from the art, right? It kind of gets in the way. So I would get rid of this. The Unreal Engine logo is kind of a hit and miss thing. Like it's not too big, so it doesn't distract, but I don't think it adds anything. So I think the Unreal Engine logo in this case is like sort of neutral, I guess. But yeah, I would say, like I've said this a couple times, right? Where if you do something that isn't something that is normally done in Unreal Engine, then having an Unreal Engine tag on there makes sense, because then it's like, wait, what? This is in Unreal Engine? That's crazy. But if it's just like some generic like game art stuff, you don't need to add Unreal Engine logos to it. Like, it was cool when it came out. Now it's just, yeah. Everyone does it, but no one knows why anymore, right? So that's like an easy thing to optimize. Make it more about the work. Even this Haunted Sanctuary one, right? Like increasing the size of that circle and making it like fully impact the thumbnail is going to be so much more impactful than having like the thumbnail underneath it, or like the font underneath it. Especially because as soon as you hover over it, it's going to do that overlay anyway. So it's there anyway. Yeah, and I think I love this thumbnail. This thumbnail is great. Make it bigger, and I think you're onto a winner with this one. It looks awesome. It kind of has like a very graphical kind of nature to it. This one, I think you can definitely pick like a better angle. It's not really represented well. We're gonna dive into that. Slap in Comic Sans. Oh no, not Comic Sans. Oh my god. It's horrendous. Oh. How dare you. Let's actually start with this one. So wait, what did you say? You mentioned that the Haunted Sanctuary is an old project. There's 5 months between them. 5 months is not that bad. 5 months is pretty decent. This one looks cool. Just from like a lighting perspective, right? Like this one has a lot of potential, even though like a lot of the other areas from the scene are like really dark. This one is really cool, like very moody, graphical, like interpretation of the scene. That is cool. So we got like breakdowns here as well. The master material, we got some references. Like a breakdown here as well. This is quite nice. It is very subtle, right? But it's very clean as well. Like, I like this presentation. We've got like some turntables. A lot of geo for something that doesn't need geo. And then like the way that I always want people to look at geometry, right? Or like topology, is have it in consistency, right? Like consistency matters a lot. So for example, we have like this section here where you add like a couple of bevels, right? But this shape still really feels low poly, right? So then we kind of got into this like space where it's like, oh, you do want to make the bevel really rounded, but then the main shape is still like very low poly. So it is probably better to get rid of like the bevel and add like a couple more subdivisions that way to kind of make it like more rounded, right? So that is honestly, when people like look at topology, it's more about the logic of where the topology is rather than just like the count of the topology, right? Or like the density necessarily. I mean, density to a degree, but and the same can be said about like the boat kind of has like a good amount of topology for like the main shape of the boat. But then the paddle is really, really dense again, right? So that consistency gets broken again. That can definitely be improved. Let's have a look. I think overall the composition is really interesting. I think the lighting here is pretty well done. The implementation of the trim sheets and the way that you use the trim sheets is like pretty basic. When it comes to actually representing like the architectural shape and like what you would expect from like a normal building to look like, right? Like the details and the way that it's built up, it's kind of missing. It feels very 3D-ish. And the only reason why I get to criticize it is because you put up a zoomed in detail shot of the building itself, right? If we didn't have this zoomed in shot, and well, if we didn't have like the breakdown down here, right? Then I wouldn't be able to criticize it because it comes across more as like deliberate to be in the background, right? Obviously, for this course, you kind of want to showcase that you can make a modular kit and that you can use trim sheets. So you do want to show it off, but then I would expect like a little bit more detail in the trim sheet and using it in like a better way, right? Always, it's coming back to references, right? Where these sort of shapes, like let's say like these shapes of like the windows and like how they're all built, where's that coming from, right? Like where's the reference for that? I mean, we do have like references down at the bottom, but they're too tiny for me to actually look at stuff, right? Which kind of defeats the point. And like the stuff that you have on here is not even relevant to the architecture style that you wanted to go for, apart from the main shape, right? So you took like the silhouette, but then you didn't really take like any of like the architectural details and like how that architecture is built up, right? So there's a disconnect between like the, I guess, the follow through of like the architectural details, the architecture. I'm not sure what all this is supposed to represent, so I'm quite confused with this. So you said that drawing the temple? Like a drawing of the temple somewhere? Did I miss it? Don't think so, right? Yeah, so we don't really have like a drawing here. So this is not really, in my opinion, not really adding anything to it. The same can potentially be said about like the references in the master material. This kind of deviates, right? I kind of look through things. I kind of look at things with like my level art lens, where like a tech artist might be a little bit more interested in this kind of stuff. So yeah, pick what you wanna convey, I guess, right? In that case. I ended up doing an original design for the temple. But that doesn't really. Oh, are you talking about the references that I was talking about? So here's the issue with doing an original design, and this is not just you, right? Like this is anyone out there, including myself, right? if you do an original design of anything, it still needs to follow like the logical designs of like buildings and architecture and like the construction methods and all that kind of stuff, right? Whenever you as an environment artist are thinking about designing anything, like you are doubling up the amount of work that you're going to need to do. That is why concept artists are like their own discipline within the industry, right? Because they get to think about like all those things, and then you get to focus on more the execution side of it while having like a base understanding, right? But you kind of expect the concept artist to then do like all the research and kind of think about like the building materials and how they're used and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you are doing an original design, it needs to be as well researched as like the buildings that are around in real life. So like coming back to the ref, like you're saying, which is really difficult, especially if you're on like a tight timeline where you do want to build up your portfolio in a reasonable amount of time. Doing your own designs like doubles or even triples the amount of work that you have to do, or the amount of thinking and potential rework as well, right? So be careful with that stuff. Like using concepts or using references, that's all fine, right? But if you then deviate, you kind of still need to build up with that. Cool. Yeah, so I think this one is actually more, in general, the way that I would look at it is more like a compositional exploration, right? Because you did make the trim sheets, you kind of made like a couple of assets, but then the majority of them, let's see. Yeah, you use mega scans for the foliage, the trees and the flowers and all that kind of stuff, right? And that is a lot of the scene, right? But that is something to keep in mind. The stuff that you did looks decent, right? I think the most underwhelming thing was like we discussed before, the use of the trim sheet. Like I don't think the trim sheet itself looks necessarily bad. It's just the use of it can definitely be improved. Yeah. Have a look. The presentation can also be improved, right? I'm never a fan of, unless if you're doing them in such a way where like everything is kind of presented in like a very consistent gray background with like a very nice lighting setup. If you kind of have that consistency going through it, that is good. But we're kind of jumping all over the place where it's just like black background. I know that you tried to do some additional stuff, right? Because I can see, I mean, this is going to be nitpicky. Like I can see the edges for where you try to cut it out, right? So that is good. That step of you trying to cut it out and present it in like a different way, you just have to, yeah, again, take it the next step, right? Cool. Then we're going to go on to this one next. Let's have a look at what people were saying before, right? So Justin was saying trying to break in as well, but practicing my abilities through personal projects and challenges like the current one. Yeah. Oh, both practicing my abilities too. Yeah, that's awesome. I work in an art gallery in London. It sounds nice, but I don't feel as fulfilled or happy than what I do in environment art in my own time. Yeah, but I do wonder how much of that is going to remain, right? Because I've had that feeling as well for like a long time, and I still sort of have. Like I don't think that feeling ever went away, because with your personal work, you get to do what you want to do, right? And that individualistic, like, oh, I don't know, like what is it, like self-sustained approach, like always was really appealing to me. Like making my own decisions and then also paying for like the wrong decisions myself, like all that kind of stuff, like is really rewarding for me. So I wonder if it has something to do with that, or if it's just the art. Ken is saying I immigrated to the States 6 years ago, and I was doing other things to put food on the table, but now definitely looking to get back in. Yeah. Sometimes you have to do what you do, right? Like, that is all good. I mean, I did like this is like when I was a student, right? I fucking worked my ass off doing like different jobs as well. Trying to afford my PC. Can you refer us to game art pipelines we can learn from? Courses, blogs, tutorials that are legit? We talked about some stuff in the beginning of this this live stream as well. If you want to learn more about like art pipelines, honestly, a good place to start is just ArtStation. They have like a whole overview of like how to make modular environments in environment in Unreal Engine, which is really good. And a course that I've seen a lot of people do, but it might be intense for if you're a new starter, is the one from Tiago Klafke, where he takes you through how to make like a full environment scratch. Don't get me wrong, at the end of the day, it's still a job and I need to fulfill a contract, but I just like games in general. Oh yeah. I do get that. Like there's like a rewarding and like satisfying feeling about like shipping a game and then seeing it in people's hands, and especially the people that you're close to. Like my little brother, he's like a big Jurassic World fan, right? Or like a Jurassic fan, I guess. And I worked on Jurassic World Evolution on the first one, and being able to give that to him as a present and then seeing him play that for the first time was really satisfying, you know, like just, yeah, it was a really proud moment where you get to see like a person that you love like enjoy a thing that you created like right there in front of you. Very special. All right, next project here. I'm thrilled to share my demo reel. This is an original work I created based on a story I wrote. It was a great and fun experience, and I learned a lot. Especially since everything was from my imagination. Yeah. So what are we looking at here? So in terms of like the story, right? So like a shootout gone wrong in like a restaurant. Like bodies on the floor, but they're like already investigating the scene by the looks of it. Cuba? Baseball? Let's have a look. Just taking it all in. Then we'll see. This stuff is cool. Like this zoomed in stuff is really nice. Crime scene. Cool. So it is interesting, right? Like the first thing that I picked up on is what is this? What is this over here? Advertising in like the standard Unreal letters still on the wall. What is this? I mean, you barely see it. Street art? Street art? It's a bunch of stuff still lying around in the scene. How dare you? All jokes aside though, like if this is like in Cuba, right? Like I'm imagining that it is because I kind of recognize the architecture a little bit. So I imagine that it's in Cuba. Then I'm kind of wondering immediately why some of the signatures or like signage isn't like English, right? The reason why I'm saying that is because there that sort of stuff really matters in terms of like the consistency of the story, right? Where you can make it like really unique to like a specific location by doing that sort of stuff, like signage and having those signs out, like it's gonna matter hugely, right? It has a big impact on the scene. Like that is honestly like one of the biggest indicators that we are in a place that we are, right? So that would be like the first thing, that like I love that you did your own story, right? And that those things, they do matter, but I think overall the story and that you're trying to set up something as a story, that is awesome. I like your approach to it as well. We have some pretty interesting like divisions between foreground, middle ground, and background, right? So there's like the composition is good, especially in the main scene. Now, when we get to the additional shots, though, like I feel like they're kind of just like throw away, and like we don't know what we should focus on necessarily. Like the composition feels really off. Like for example, here we're just looking at a sign that is, in my opinion, just not like really interesting to look at just by itself, because also the rest of it feels a little bit basic, and also we're, yeah, just like it doesn't have like the detail that you would expect from like a detail shot, right? Um, especially when you then have something that potentially looks really interesting in the foreground, um, but then not using it. Kind of, I don't know. It's a weird choice. Like these two shots, like I really don't like them, especially compared to like the main shot, which is like great. These two are just like really weird. I thought it would push the story that this happened in a party. But then focusing on the sign is the way to do that, right? If you're looking at it through that lens, I can get it, right? Like you're trying to show off that it is a party or something like that. But you're, how would I say this? You're kind of doing exposure to the world by trying to explain something by telling it, right? It's like, oh, this is a pizza party because it says so on the sign, rather than what does a pizza party actually look like, right? What are the visuals that make up for like a pizza party, right? And thinking about that, like you want to share that visually without having to tell people that it is what it is, right? That is honestly like our main job as like environment artists, right? Is that we have to make the set dressing and the environments in such a way that people can get it without having to read or like look at signs on the wall or something like that, right? So I can kind of get the reasoning behind this one. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Like, I think you're trying to show off that there's like bodies on the floor, but I think a more interesting way of doing that was probably just having like let's see, like imagine like a camera that kind of is like angling downwards to the floor, and you can show like a bunch of really nice like roughness variation and breakup, right? So that, imagine that this is your screen, for example, right? So we're seeing the nice ground material, we're seeing like the, I don't know, maybe the blood, maybe a bunch of bullets, maybe there's like a body on the floor. Like that makes for like a way more interesting like shot of the scene, rather than something that is like really hard to understand at first glance. And honestly, we're not even looking at the bodies, we're looking at the car, because this light is like grabbing like all the attention of the scene, and that's where we're looking, right? So yeah, the composition can definitely be improved. Let's have a look at some of the other stuff. This is cool. So like the presentation, like the breakdown, doing all the cool shader stuff, showing that off. Really cool. I like that you do that. Showing the versatility of the material as well. That is cool. That could potentially, let's see, input parameters. Yeah, that could potentially be done with like, I don't know, like a slider in Unreal or something like that. You make a mask and then you control the color in Unreal. That's beside the point. It does look nice, but you're damaging it up. These shots are really nice, but I would again focus on like a couple ones and show us like the breakdown of the car, right? Like what does the topology look like? What does the UVs look like? What do the textures look like? All that kind of stuff. Let me see. Because I agree, like I get why you're showing this off, right? But I would rather have you do let's see. Imagine this sort of setup, right? Where like the car is on the side. Let's say you have like a car here and then a car here, right? So you can kind of like see the left and the right side. Then you just do like a breakdown of like all the texture maps, maybe the UVs. This is the triangle count. This is like the texture density, or like the size of the textures, right? You kind of have like all that information, and you condense that all down into like a singular image, and you make it like nicely presentable that way. Have a look at the demo reel. Do that real quick. There is definitely something to be said about like the lighting as well. I think the biggest letdown for the scene is currently the lighting. It is very confusing. Like I don't really know where to look as well. Where normally like if you have like a well-defined like focal point, right? Like probably like the area inside, right? So let's say this is where you want to focus, especially on the broken glass, right? Because you want that to pop out. What you then want to do is reduce the intensity of whatever is like distracting from that and increase the intensity of some of the other lights. Like it is pretty difficult like in the beginning to do like lighting properly, right? But the way that I always try to explain it is that you kind of have to focus on you put the most intense light around the area that you want to have like the most focus on. That is your first priority, right? Kind of define a focal point. Like where do you want people to look? And then make that like the brightest point, right? Like this is very, very typical. So you make that the brightest point. Because that's going to mean, especially in a dark scene like this, is that is where people are going to focus on, right? Because that adds a lot of contrast to the scene. But if you look at the scene right now, what is adding the most contrast is the sign. So that is where people are going to watch first, right? All the sign is grabbing all the attention in the scene, making it really difficult to then realize that it's not about the sign, it's actually about the restaurant underneath the sign, right? And it's about balancing like multiple different things, right? Like you have the lights coming from the cars and then also the lights coming from the inside, and there's just like so much lighting going on. I think there might even be like fake lights here as well, I think, to kind of light up the whole area. There's just too much going on there and it gets really confusing. What you could do in that case instead is just simplify things down, right? Have the interiors dark and only have the police lights shining at them would be really impactful. Having the police lights not on and having only the lights coming from the inside would be really impactful. But now we're doing everything at the same time and it kind of muddies everything. There's no hierarchy to see. But yeah. Okay. Let's have a little recap here. And then since we already ran out of time, I feel that we have to skip Callum for this time around. So number one is, I would say looking at the last project, is relighting that scene could have a huge impact. You don't have to redo like any of the assets or anything, just relighting the scene and like cutting out like some of the images there and then potentially doing some breakdowns. That could already help a lot. But what I want you to focus on in the future though is smaller story-driven scenes. That's what I want you to focus on, right? I think the original scale was actually like pretty well sized in like the scope of it, because you only get to focus on like a couple of elements and the rest of it was like nicely composed, right? So you had a lot of time to think about all that stuff. Then we jump onto the new scene, and the new scene was so much and so complex in terms of the storytelling, in terms of the lighting, like all that kind of stuff. It was a lot happening. And trying to make sense of that chaos and trying to distill it down to what it actually needs to be, that's like an art by itself, right? So try to simplify things, go for smaller, go for storytelling, and also use a base concept, but put your own twist on it. Because I know that a lot of people, including myself, hate having to work from a concept just by itself, especially for personal work. But what you can do is use like the foundation of a concept and then use that as inspiration to do your own thing on top of that, right? Which means that, again, I'm trying to look at this from like an optimized workflow perspective, right? Where I don't want you to build like something from scratch every time, because that's going to take a long time. I mean, if you want to do that, and if you're like, no, screw you, I'm going to do my own thing, which would definitely be my response, by the way. You can still do that, but then I want you to realize that's going to take like way longer, and you're going to need to put in like much more attention to like all the individual things to make them look as good as using a foundation from somewhere else. And then number 3 is more individual detail. What I mean by that is that what I see in your portfolio is that there is like a nice focus on the bigger environments, right? That is what you love to do. But what is lacking is the attention to detail on the individual assets to make that come to the forefront. I think the car was a really good example, but even the car itself still had like a very generic feel to it, right? Cars are very complex. If you want to make them look good, it takes a lot of time. That is like a portfolio piece by itself, right? But that's where kind of the combination of 2 and 3 comes into mind. Like, pick something that is smaller scale, and if you need to add a lot of individual detail to something that has complexity, for example, the car, make the scene around the car instead. Because then the amount of time that you're going to be spending on making that car look good is going to be in service of like the hero prop of the scene. Where in this case, the cars, they could have honestly been like mostly in the dark, almost completely invisible, and it would not have hurt the story at all, right? Because it's more about like the silhouette of it looking like a cop car than it actually being like a completely visible cop car. That's what it's all about. So yeah, that's what I would want you to focus on. Just like higher individual details, right? So if that is like a hero prop by itself, or like if you want to incorporate that into your scene somehow, like I want to see more attention to detail there. And then yeah, smaller, well told stories, and then making the most of what you already have, improving on the breakdowns, improving on the lighting, all that kind of stuff. That is all going to be way easier when you do like smaller scenes. So yeah, thank you for sharing your work, Mo. I appreciate it. Then looking forward to what are you gonna do in the future? All right. With that said, let's see what was said in the chat, and then we're gonna round it off. So let me switch back. Because yeah, quite knackered. It's always exhausting. It may not look like it, but like it's intense. I'm I'm hot. Justin is saying, oh, don't know why, but seeing people having an enjoyable experience you create is probably what I love the most. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's always nice. It's always nice to get like feedback from people. Have I been hitting the gym? I have started, but yeah, I bought some weights that are behind me. I'm gonna do a workout like afterwards. But the main thing that I'm doing is I'm walking 10,000 steps a day. Like I walk to work and I walk back. So if you call that like hitting the gym, then I'll take it. Or it might just be my new look, you know, that makes me like more fit looking. Oh, something not go out. Da, da, da. Oh, I see. I see why. Cool, yeah. But we're not gonna make this any longer than it needs to be. Big shout out for everyone for being here. Massive shout out to Mo, to Beau, and then also to who do we have in the beginning? Oh my god, my brain is like a sieve, I swear to god. The other person that we had in the beginning. But yeah, thank you all so much for sharing your work. Thank you all so much for being here. Beau was saying so much information given through this portfolio review. Thanks yet again. Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's always nice that I get to get some thanks from people as well. So I'm happy you enjoyed it, and I wish you the best of luck. If there is any other questions, like you're a part of the community, right? So feel free to ask questions in the community. Reach out to me if you need help. There's a lot of people available there as well. Damian. Yeah, it's not Daniel, it's Damian. But thanks, Mo. Thanks for reminding me. Kai was saying, thank you. Yeah. Thanks, all of you. Tomorrow I'll be back because we're gonna do Whip Wednesday, so we're gonna go through people's feedback for the week. So I'll see you then. Have a nice evening, and then I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.